Reddit is a social media platform famous for its massive collection of user-generated content, with more than 50 million people visiting every day. Because users can remain completely anonymous, Reddit has become a place where people openly share deeply personal experiences without worrying about revealing their identities. With such a huge audience, it's no surprise that countless strange and genuinely unsettling stories have surfaced over the years. What makes many of these stories especially disturbing is that they come from ordinary people who found themselves in situations that any of us could encounter in everyday life. In this video, we'll be looking at several stories posted on Reddit that the majority of readers believed were completely true. Our first story comes from Reddit user Surprise, originally posted in r subscribed, the bridge. This incident has been stuck in my head lately, and I think it's finally time I shared the full story. I live in North Wales, in the United Kingdom. Anyone who's ever visited knows it's an incredible place to live. But if you're a teenage kid, it's honestly pretty boring. So my friends and I spent most of our free time exploring the countryside and the coastline. Even though the population here is much smaller than in the nearby cities, a major railway line runs straight through the area. The tracks stretch from Wales into England, crossing several small concrete bridges along the way. One night a few years ago, one of us suggested exploring one of those bridges after someone in the group noticed a metal hatch nearby. We figured it might lead inside the bridge itself. When we took a closer look, we realized we'd need some proper tools to get it open. So we came back later with a crowbar and carefully pried the hatch loose. We had to be extremely discreet because the railway tracks were only a few feet away. If a train driver spotted us, there was a good chance they'd report us to the police. We quickly removed the heavy steel cover and climbed down the ladder beneath it. Once everyone made it safely inside, we decided to crawl all the way through to the other end of the bridge. The space inside was unbelievably cramped. If you're wondering what I mean by inside a bridge, don't worry, we were just as confused at first. Honestly, if we hadn't found that hidden hatch, I never would have imagined there was an entire hollow passage built inside the bridge. As we crawled farther in, the tight space became more and more unsettling. The tunnel seemed far longer than any of us expected. About halfway through, though, there were narrow slits where you could look down at the highway below. Strangely enough, seeing outside made us feel a little less trapped. At that point, aside from the discomfort of squeezing through such a confined space, we still thought we were just a group of teenagers on another harmless adventure. But after crawling several more yards past the halfway point, one of my friends said he could see something in the distance. Even though we were hesitant, we agreed to keep going and take a closer look. That turned out to be a terrible decision. I reached it first, and let me tell you, I've never felt fear like that in my entire life. In front of me was a folding chair facing a blank wall. Taped to the wall was a page that looked like it had been torn from a newspaper or magazine. It showed a woman posing provocatively. The reason I hesitate to simply call it pornography is because something about it felt different. I can't fully explain it, but it carried a sense of cruelty rather than sexuality. What disturbed me even more was that the woman's eyes had been carefully cut out. The cuts were clean and deliberate, not the kind of rough tear someone would make in a hurry. None of us could find the words to say anything. Then we noticed a blood-stained condom lying nearby. Pure panic took over. Without saying a single word, we scrambled back the way we had come as fast as we could. We smashed our knees and shins against the sharp concrete edges while crawling desperately toward the ladder we'd climbed down only minutes earlier. The whole time, every one of us was praying that the hatch above hadn't somehow been closed. There was no way to know until someone reached the top. Thankfully, it was still open. The second we got out, we ran as far from that place as we possibly could. I'm sure some people reading this will be disappointed that we never actually encountered whoever had been sitting in that chair, but I can't stress enough how completely out of place everything we found was. Nothing like that belongs where I live. Sometimes I still lie awake thinking about that night. I picture someone climbing down into that bridge, crawling through the darkness, and quietly sitting in that chair facing the wall. Honestly, I can't imagine anything more surreal. Looking back, I realized none of us ever told anyone what we found down there. When you're a teenager, your first instinct is to forget something like that ever happened. But in hindsight, we probably should have called the police, or at least told someone. Because whatever had happened beneath that bridge, it certainly wasn't the work of a mentally healthy person. That's my story. Sorry it ended up being so long. I wandered off track a little, since this is my first Reddit post, and I wanted to describe everything as accurately as I could. I'm a few years older now, and hopefully a little braver too. I've actually been thinking about going back with someone else this time, just to see what might still be waiting down there. Thanks for reading. The post quickly attracted a huge amount of attention, not only from members of that subreddit, but also from Reddit users across the platform and people around the internet. What made the story even more fascinating was that it didn't end there. The original poster actually followed through on that promise. They returned to the bridge, took photographs of what they found, and uploaded them as proof. A few days later, they made another post that began like this. Yesterday evening, a friend and I decided to go back to that terrifying place, hoping to find at least some trace of the bizarre scene we discovered years ago. We weren't disappointed. To be honest, it was even worse than I had imagined. Before you look at the photos, there's something important to understand. Aside from what you're about to see, the inside of the bridge is simply not a place anyone could realistically live. The floor was covered in thick layers of dust, and crawling through the narrow passage was miserable. But even that was nothing compared to the overwhelming stench that filled the entire structure. The intense heat inside only made it worse. I don't want to ramble, but I have to emphasize just how uneasy I felt crawling through that tunnel toward the chamber. Even though we brought something to defend ourselves, the feeling of dread never went away. The tension was made even worse by the layout of the bridge itself. If we had run into someone or something, there would have been no quick or safe way to escape through such a cramped passage. It honestly felt like crawling into the entrance of hell. With that said, here's what we found inside. The poster then shared a link to the photographs taken during the visit, along with the following descriptions. If you look closely, you can see my friend's left hand gripping the ladder while the rest of his body disappears into the darkness. The darkness inside completely swallows the passage. You can't even see your own hand in front of your face. The first thing we came across was what looked like a makeshift bed. The pieces of foam suggest someone had been using it as a place to sleep. This is the broken padlock. I believe it originally secured the entrance. A view looking back the other way, a length of rope. This is where things started becoming even more disturbing. I'm certain the liquid inside this plastic container wasn't milk. This is what was causing the unbearable smell. Human waste and filthy newspapers were scattered around the area. It almost made us throw up. Just before reaching the room, we found this strip of duct tape, the narrow entrance leading into the open chamber inside the bridge. Even with two powerful flashlights, I still couldn't see the far side of the room. That alone gave us an overwhelming feeling of dread. This is the entrance without the camera flash, so you can get an idea of what it would have looked like under nothing more than the candlelight we believe the person used. Honestly, the place felt like something out of a nightmare. The very first thing I saw after entering the room was this knife. Then there was this provocative photograph. It's hard to make out in the picture, but the person's private area had been burned with what looked like the tip of a cigarette. Scissors, duct tape, and several different kinds of brushes. This candle was attached to the wall. It was probably the main source of light in the room. This was the only magazine page still attached to the wall. Unfortunately, it isn't the same picture I described in my previous post. The page is dated 1997, suggesting these items have been here for a very long time. And here's the chair. In this photo, you can see a pile of belongings on the left and what appears to be a blanket on the right. We searched carefully, but the blood-stained condoms were gone. That was strange, especially since everything else was still there. This is what you'd see if the chair were turned to face the opposite direction. You can also see how the ladder opens into the room, making it easier to stand upright while giving someone plenty of places to hide below. The same view again, but this time without the camera flash. It's lit only by our flashlights, so you can see just how impossibly dark this place really is, even with that candle on the wall. This will be the last time I ever go down there. Thanks for reading. Not long afterward, the original poster deleted their Reddit account and disappeared from the platform, allowing the story to slowly fade into internet history. The bridge shares certain similarities with Alex's story from Tennessee that we've covered before. Like that case, no one has ever been able to prove with absolute certainty that these events really happened. Even so, the large collection of photographs uploaded as evidence made many readers believe the story was genuine. Another detail that added to its credibility was the account itself. Before deleting it, the user behind the username had an established posting history suggesting the account hadn't been created solely to fabricate a dramatic horror story. The fact that the post was shared in a subreddit dedicated to stories believed to be true only made it seem even more credible. So who was the person living inside that bridge? Were they someone driven there by unimaginable tragedy? Or were they simply a deeply disturbed individual with terrifying obsessions? We'll probably never know the answer. But whatever the truth may be, the image of someone sitting alone in the darkness beneath that bridge is enough to haunt almost anyone who hears this story. Our second story was first posted in a subreddit where people share paranormal experiences they believe they've encountered in real life. Most of these stories involve unexplained events that are often attributed to spirits or other supernatural forces. But if the story you're about to hear really happened, it may be even more terrifying than any ghost story. In March 2015, Reddit user RedWalkBlue80 shared the following post. I use an app called Sleep as Android to help improve my sleep. One of its features records sounds you make during the night, including coughing, snoring, or talking in your sleep. I've been using it since the 1st of October 2013, and until now it had never recorded anything except noises I made myself, like rolling over, coughing, or similar sounds. Then at 2:04 a.m. on December 30, something very strange happened. That night, my 3-year-old child was sleeping in bed with me because they were afraid of the dark. It was just the two of us in the house. The next day, while listening back through the recordings before deleting them, I found one that completely shocked me. Throughout the recording, you can hear several clicking noises. Near the end, I say, "What are you doing?" Immediately afterward, a deep voice replies, "Nothing." Right after that, the clicking noises become much louder. Then, just before the recording ends, the same voice says, "That's what we thought." This honestly scared me. I don't remember waking up that night. The only explanation I can think of is that maybe I answered my own question while I was still asleep. But the voice doesn't sound anything like mine or anyone else's that I know. It's definitely not something my 3-year-old could imitate. I also have no idea where the clicking noises came from. I sleep with a fan running in the corner of the room, but these sounds seem to be coming from right beside the phone sitting on my nightstand. I'm hoping someone can help explain this. I enjoy creepy stories, just not when they happen inside my own home. The post quickly attracted widespread attention across Reddit, especially because of the audio recording that accompanied it. One user analyzed the recording and wrote, "The pitch of your voice when you ask, 'What are you doing?' is around 265 hertzes, while the voice responding appears to be about 95 hertzes. That's an unusually deep voice, even for most adults. However, the recording seems to contain a lot of low-frequency noise. So I think the speaker's actual voice is probably closer to 190 hertzes based on the higher frequencies, and a few comparison recordings I made myself. I'm a man, and to me it still sounds like another man's voice. If I had a normal recording of your speaking voice, then lowered its pitch for comparison, I'd be able to say with much more confidence whether that's really you or not. After this analysis, many readers became convinced that the mysterious reply was almost certainly not the original poster talking in her sleep. So, had there really been some unseen presence standing beside the mother and her child that night? Or was the truth even more horrifying? One theory, proposed by Reddit user Teeper the Cloud, quickly became the explanation that many people found the most convincing. At first I thought maybe you were just mumbling in your sleep. But after listening to the recording several more times, I'm convinced the voice answering, "What are you doing?" isn't yours. I think you may have been the victim of a home intruder. The clicking noises sound very much like someone rummaging through your belongings. They're louder and sharper than the kinds of random clicks you'd normally hear in a room. It may sound like a strange conclusion, but it's still far more believable than ghosts. Here's what I think happened. Someone broke into your home, intending to steal from you. While searching through your room, they were making noise with the bags they were carrying to hold whatever they planned to take. I believe those rustling and clicking sounds are what we're hearing throughout the recording. That detail is actually the foundation of my theory. Those noises were probably loud enough to partially wake you, but not enough to fully bring you out of sleep. Asking, "What are you doing?" is the kind of question people say almost automatically. I think you blurted it out while your brain was still half asleep, without fully processing what was happening around you. That likely startled the intruder. But when they realized you weren't getting out of bed or reacting any further, they probably assumed you were still asleep or only barely awake, and replied nothing, hoping to convince you that whatever you'd heard was just part of a dream. I think the recording itself supports this theory. Notice how the clicking noises stop immediately after you ask, "What are you doing?" That can't just be a coincidence, can it? If I were a burglar searching through someone's room and suddenly heard the homeowner speak, I'd freeze instantly. That's the first pause. The second pause happens because they're waiting to see if you're actually awake. Once they realize you aren't getting up, they continue searching through the room. That's when the noises start again. The clicking sounds remind me of metal clasps or key rings, maybe attached to a backpack or a shoulder bag. Eventually, they may have decided it wasn't worth the risk, closed their bag, and left. I actually own a briefcase with metal latches, and when I snap it shut, it makes almost the exact same sound. I know this theory sounds a little crazy, but personally it's still far easier for me to believe than ghosts, although that's probably because I don't believe in the supernatural. After listening to the recording a few more times, it also sounds like, right after saying nothing, the voice begins another sentence before stopping. It almost sounds like it's about to say go. Maybe the full sentence was meant to be nothing. Go back to sleep. This interpretation paints a far more terrifying picture than any ghost story. According to the theory, the strange sounds weren't caused by a supernatural presence at all. They came from a real person. Someone had broken into the house, someone who had quietly made their way all the way to the bedside while a mother and her young child slept just a few feet away. Many Reddit users found this explanation far more convincing than a paranormal one. They repeatedly urged the original poster to be extremely careful, making sure every door and window was securely locked before going to bed. Sometime later, the poster shared one final update, the 21st of April 2015. I no longer live in that house, so there won't be any further updates. Thanks. And that was the end of the story. No additional explanations were ever given. Looking back, the home invasion theory does seem like the most plausible explanation. After all, supernatural events are much harder to accept as an explanation for something that happened in everyday life. It's unsettling to imagine the alternative, a stranger silently standing beside the bed, watching a mother and her child sleep with a completely expressionless face. Of course, the story has never been free from skepticism. Many people continue to question whether it really happened at all. Perhaps the only fair way to judge the case is to listen to the original recording yourself and decide what you believe.